When you use a third-party jackpot tool, there's trouble. So not sitting directly on the gaming gateway, let's say, whichever game gateway you're using, you want your jackpot to sit on your game gateway. Cannot know if this has been cancelled. They cannot know if the behavior of the player is a risky behavior. So as a consequence, they will just treat every contribution the same, and they will not be able to hold off the fourth. So that's one of the main reasons why I wanted absolutely to have it in-house.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Connected. Thank you for joining me today. I've got one of my favorite guests on, Alex from Alea, and his co-founder, Charlotte. We've talked before about Alea. Alea is a longtime partner of Pragmatic Solutions and well known, I'm sure, to all of you as one of the leading game aggregation providers in the industry, known for not just their content library, but also their approach to technology and API governance. We've spoken about that before, haven't we, Alex? But today, Charlotte's joined us, and we're talking about a new product from Alea, new for 2026, which is Alea Jackpots. Player engagement built around the most player favorite feature around slots games is the jackpot big prizes. And we're going to unpack that a bit, talk about what it means to Alea and how it came about to be a new product direction for them, how it fits in with Alea Play, and how it fits in with your portfolio as an operator. So welcome to Connected, Charlotte and Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ash, for having us and me again. The first episode we did was really good. I got a lot of good feedback about it, and I'm very, very happy to be back here with you and with Charlotte.
Well, Alex, you're one of the guests that I feel very comfortable talking with because you can hold your own, and it's always a pleasure speaking with you. You've got a real passion for the business, which is part of what I'm really interested to hear more about, because the impression I get from Alea in terms of approach is you understand very well, having born the business out of Slots Millions as an operator, you understand the operator's demands, you understand the player's demands, and your product direction always seems really well informed from listening to your customers now, but also having your own B2C experience. So maybe just for those of you listening that are not familiar with Alea as a content aggregator, let's start first with what Alea is in terms of Alea Play before we get to what Alea Jackpots means on top of that.
Right. We started Alea in 2012, as you mentioned, as a B2C operation, where Slots Million, we first had a QSR license, went on a Maltese license, UKGC license, SGA license. And at some point around 2020, we decided to split with my ex-business partner. And we sat down with Charlotte and we said, okay, what are we going to do now? And we decided to continue the adventure together as a game aggregator. Why as a game aggregator? Because we developed the entire platform of Slots Million in-house. We went to the granularity of developing our own chat, which, to be honest, wasn't the smartest thing to do because there are many chats out there, and we should have taken more a modular approach. That's exactly what you guys are doing. That's, I believe, the right way to do. But back inside, we wanted to have a control over everything. We know that we understood that actually the more control you want, the less you have, because then you're dependent on your own people, which you would think that is a good idea. But actually, if these people are leaving the company, there is no other way now to maintain this product or upgrade this product. And it happened to us with the payment gateway. That's the first thing that fell. And other modules start falling. And then we thought, okay, we need to rethink the approach and we need to become modular. And all of these modules, we should benchmark them on the market, look at third parties that are doing that better than us because they focus on one thing and start working with them. But the module we thought was the chorus one. At the beginning, we thought was CRM, handling the data of the player, all the logic or the bonusing, the assessing of player and segmentation. But that was done by other company and pretty well. I mean, Optimove is doing that amazingly. Smartico, a quite new company, I think they're 4 years old, is doing it quite interestingly. And actually, Optimove just acquired Smartico. And there are other out there, I'm not going to name them, like Fast Track. Come on, let's name Fast Track because they're really cool. But what we found out, and what we believed at least, is that the only thing we could not change and find in any other industry was the game aggregation. The transactions that, I mean, games are at the core of our businesses, and games are ruled by APIs, gaming APIs that are as, it's important for them to be as secured, as reliable as banking APIs. Okay, so we started developing what I would call a boring product, which is a product made of tubes, language, API language. There's nothing fancy about that when you think about it. But once you build that foundation, you have games, you have games features. You start with the free spins and with the tournaments that the providers are offering. You start also with the jackpot, and I'm going to come back to that. And then you go above that, and you have other type of gamification. You have the data. Now, one of our core, the core aspect of what Alea does is data analysis. We believe we have more data than 99% of the operator out there, because we address markets they don't address because of the volumetry that we have. Of course, operations like stake, for example, are very, very big. But there's few operations that reach the reach that we have. And data analysis, and especially now with AI, is something that we're looking a lot into. And on top of that is the building agnostic meta games. Because we've said it before, game studios, they have their own features. They have their free spins, they have their tournaments, they have also their jackpots, but it is proprietary. And what operators were asking us, it came from their needs, and they started asking us that in 2020 is, please, could you bring an agnostic jackpot? That was the first meta game they would ask for. And there was some product on the markets. We benchmarked them because we wanted, to be honest, to go from the approach where I came from before, which is let's choose a third party. But to be completely honest, and nothing that, and I don't say that to disregard what's on the market, but let's say that it wasn't meeting our requirements. And actually, there's one product that we've seen afterwards that we thought, fuck, they're pretty cool. Actually, it's a pity we didn't see them before. And you're using them. It's, what's the name of this company? Thrilltech. We need to say clearly, we like Thrilltech's products. We think they're cool. Yeah, we do believe we have something they don't have. Charlotte's going to explain. It's very technical. But in terms of products, also in terms of brand communication, they're cool. You know?
But I mean, was Blue Ribbon the first to do this in terms of?
Okay. Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, because they were just gaining some traction on the market when they were acquired and taken off the market. So I guess that really created a gap. But
yes,
already evidence of customer demand for games independent engagement tools such as Jackpots.
Yeah, and there's something, I mean, that fascinates me the way is that I met Amir Askarov when he launched Blue Ribbon. The guy was coming from Playtech. I'm sorry, I forgot the name of his co-founder, his business partner. And I met him at WGS in Barcelona. And I invested, I think I own between 5 and 10% of the company. I don't remember anymore. I was an investor early stage. We didn't integrate them. Imagine that the casino manager wanted them badly. First of all, was completely, it was a no-go. No, Alex, it's a company you invested. We're not just going to integrate them because we invested. So, okay, do whatever you want. 1 year after, yeah, they're so freaking cool. We want to integrate them. Okay, let's do it. It took us time. Integration is always painful, and there's always friction for an operator to integrate something new. I mean, always. And this integration was quite easy, actually. But then Blue Ribbon was sold to DraftKings, and DraftKings took the product just for themselves. Okay, Beyond Play came on the market as a play behind, bet behind tool. Carolina pitched me as an investor. I invested in Beyond Play. It becomes a jackpot tool, very much inspired by what Blue Ribbon did, and she doesn't hide it. We enter in conversation with them. Charlotte is in direct conversation with Carolina. We are integrating Beyond Play, and bam, she sells it to FanDuel, which is 5 years after, which is the competition of DraftKings for the same amount, which is 25 mil. Both were sold at 25 mil, and I own more or less the same amount of shares in both companies. So when that happened, Charlotte looked at me and said, "Like, what the fuck am I going to do now? I guess we need to get on ourselves." And there's some kind of fate there. So that life is showing us that Jackpot seems to be important. I was an investor in both of them. We tried to integrate both of them. They bought by the same type of companies. Okay, you know what? We're going to develop our own Jackpot because life is telling us you should develop your own Jackpot, because each time you try to integrate one, even when you have shares inside of them, it doesn't happen.
It's really interesting to hear you replay that, because when I was thinking about Alea doing jackpots, I thought, who better positioned than Alea to launch a jackpot service? And you would have also the market intelligence to know there's demand for it and what value it can bring. We'll talk about the economics in a few minutes. But I hadn't realized that you had 2 failed launches. Hard to say failed because you were an investor in 2 successful exits. So congratulations to you for spotting a winner. But it's rare that you would get that kind of validation in a product and then it's off the market. So you can enter late, let's say third player to come into the market with a product, but you don't have those 2 competitors to compete with anymore because they've been taken in-house. So it seems to me it would be a natural. I now understand how the origin story behind Alea saying it's time for us to do this, and it's the only way we can be sure to launch a product that works well with what Alea's product strategy has been to date, and delivers what we expect now from a product in this service layer, but also that we know isn't going to get taken off the market tomorrow through an acquisition. So Charlotte, I'd like to hear from, my understanding is that as chief product officer at Alea, you would have looked at this, had the opportunity to, study this product gap in the market. How did you approach it? Did you say, I want to bring something different? There's immediately ways that I would improve that product? Or did you say, the landscape is defined, we just need to do an Alea version?
Maybe a little bit of both. We did a lot of benchmarks because initially we thought, just the same way you had Blue Ribbon and you had Beyond Play, maybe there was another actor in the market. Like Alex mentioned, we didn't spot ThrillTech because I think at that time it was not launched yet, but I was still looking for a product that could pretty much do this and that was good quality, and we benchmarked like a lot of them. Even some big names that have been recommended by our customers, because our customers were asking a lot about Jackpot, and they said basically, maybe you could strike a deal with those guys and get a better price, because going in direct for us is too expensive. Their product is great, but very expensive. So we'd go there and try to see. The price tag was pretty big, but also in terms of features, I felt that it was not, it's not, I want to say good enough, but it's not that it's not good enough, is that surely with good products, but not going in granularity, not taking risks in a sense. So I guess you can create a jackpot product without much effort, but you're going to have a very basic tool, basically. And then if you want to really scratch a bit further and have different algorithm options or different payout options, or be able to customize better time frames, etc., then obviously that requires more investment, more from the developer. And I could see that they hadn't done that job. So they basically created the jackpot tool good enough, like it's a jackpot, and they put it on the market, quite expensive, and I was not in love with it. Like I was a little bit underwhelmed. I don't know if I can say that, but disappointed maybe.
Well, you could put it another way and say you saw opportunities to do more than what they had done, rather than.
Yeah, okay, we could say that. But it's more really, it was not like an egotistical desire to do better than others. Is like I was really hoping I would find a tool that would do it. It's just I couldn't get it. And then the decision to actually make our own was out of finding no other solution. It's just like, okay, let's do it if we can. Like Alex said earlier, when we were an operator on Source Million, we used to even go down and develop the chat, which was probably a bad decision at the time, because we were not, there are plenty of tools that do this, and you would be wasting time in trying to make the best. Okay, this is not the core of your business. Don't spend time on this, and we probably shouldn't have done that. And here, so we've learned the lesson, and we are trying now to go to a more marketplace aspect, and we want to implement tools. We want to have partnerships with third-party providers, and this is the intention that we had with the jackpot. We're just like, we're going to find people who know how to make a jackpot, and they're doing a great job, and we're going to sell their products, and we're going to have a nice partnership. That was the intention initially, but then not finding quite a good one, we ended up going back to, okay, should we develop it ourselves? We said we don't do this anymore, but should we go back to that? And then the answer was yes.
Well, I'm just thinking about it, listening to your answer there. Let's take a step back for a second in terms of why does an operator need jackpots outside the games? Game jackpots are common with many of the leading slot suppliers, have jackpot products linked to their portfolio. Why should an operator add jackpots as something that sits outside of the game's content from a particular vendor? And then how do they do that? How does it work? How is the player contribution to the jackpot happening?
Well, as you said, it's linked to their portfolio for one thing. So basically, you're going to have a jackpot, but on their games or on some of their games. That I would say is the first clue. And secondly, when you
from a player experience, I could still be participating in a jackpot as I move between content from different suppliers.
Yes,
rather than the one-to-one relationship with Pragmatic Play jackpots applying to Pragmatic Play games and et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly.
So, yeah, okay. And then I suppose the operator has much more control over deciding the value and the proposition in terms of the jackpot, what seed it has, what variables exist that make sense for the operator to take more control over the jackpot product in their games offering.
So what I wanted to add is that game provider jackpots don't profit to the operator. If anybody is making an admin fee on those jackpots, it's the game provider itself, but they're not sharing a profit with the casino. The only jackpots made by providers where the casino can make a cut are local jackpots. The local jackpots are then you're going to find yourself in a position that you have jackpots that are much smaller, so you don't benefit to the big network jackpots that they advertise. This is very different. This is much smaller. And then this is only on the portfolio of the game provider. So you will be financing yourself the jackpot, which is fine, but then it's going to be applicable only maybe onto 100 games when you have a portfolio of 20,000. So obviously the pool is not going to grow as much, and you're going to be limited from that perspective. It's very different from network jackpots from game providers that, of course, have a huge incentive for players. It's exciting. You can win millions, but these don't bring a profit to the casino at all. If anything, they're actually more expensive. And they can be like, if you're lucky and it's one of your players winning the big million jackpot, then great, because then you can hope that this player is going to stay, redeposit, and then you will benefit from that. But if it's not the case, then you will be seeding the jackpots, you will be paying contributions, which is in addition to the game revenue you already paid to the game provider, and it's actually just more expensive.
So if I may just add that is applying especially to the big progressive life-changing jackpots like Mega Moolah, like let's say the 10 million jackpot. But you have companies like EGT, the Bulgarian slot manufacturer. They build their product on the jackpots, and they have great jackpots actually that are across all over their portfolio, and they have these minor, major, mega jackpots, and they fall, some of them quite often. As Charlotte said, the operator can't make money out of it. That's one thing. The second thing, what you said at the beginning is how, if I am an operator and I say, look, because I have a player base, and I know that I have, let's say, 1,000 players that are connected at the same time. I have other needs that if I have a player base when I have 100 players or 10,000 players connected at the same time. I want a jackpot to fall, for example, I don't know if it's between 8 p.m. and 12 p.m. where you have a peak time, you want a jackpot to fall one time, let's say there, and then you want another jackpot to fall one time per day, and you want another jackpot to fall every 3 or 4 days, every week and every month. or if you don't look at it with the periodicity, you want to look at it with the amount. You want to have, some operators are asking for jackpots that are falling every 100, 200 euros. It's small, micro jackpots, but with a very high hit frequency. If you look at the slot machine, it's the RTP. It's how you're going to deliver the wins. And then, you want to have some wins that are around 2 or 3K, some wins that are around 10K, some wins that are 100K, and some wins that are around, let's say, 1 million. Okay. And when you have a third-party jackpot, you can define all that. You can segment your player database and say, for example, this type of player, they need a jackpot that is 10 times or 100 times their bets, and this type of player, they want a jackpot of which is 10 or 100 times, 10,000 or 100,000 times their bet. Sorry. What I wanted to say, yes, and there's the other thing is how you fund the jackpot. So you take a jackpot contribution that is equivalent more or less on the big jackpots at 5% of the bet. And may I remind that the RTP is, or the house hedge is 3.5% more or less on the slot. So it's bigger than the house hedge. But is actually when the player bets €1 is betting 95 cents of a euro, and 5 cents are going to the jackpot before this bet goes, and it's not displayed. Player has it's an illusion that he's betting €1, but he's betting 95 cents. What we do. So what we do is the model that has been created by Red Tiger Gaming back in time and now Octoplay is that it's a side bet. So let's say that the player is betting €1 and then the operator is deciding it's going to be 10 cents on top or 20 cents on top. Let's say it's 20 cents. You open the game. The player decides if he wants to participate to the jackpots and if he's going to play 10 cents or 20 cents more. And from that money, the casino can take 10, 15, 20%, whatever, let's say, and have it as a revenue.
Right.
And that's the beauty of it is now the operator
which competes with the revenue from the slot game itself. I mean, it's
yes,
the margin may be greater than the underlying slot game being played.
For the operator, yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Why do it as a? I would have thought it would be a premium as a side bet. If I'm spinning a slot game at €1 a spin, that it would be debiting my wallet €5 with 5 cents to contribute to the jackpot. But you're saying instead it would be a 95-cent spin with 5 cents going to the jackpot.
Yes. So what you're referring to is the original 3 real jackpot. You remember when let's say you were playing €1 and you wouldn't have access to the jackpot. There was 3 bets, 1, 2, 3. So you pay €1, no access to the jackpot, €2, no access to the jackpot. If you play max bets, you would have access to the jackpot, right? And that would be the premium, because we reward you for doing the max bet. But later on, this has been changed completely because we were funding, remember, progressive jackpot that were pooled between all the operations of the provider. And if I'm not mistaken, Playtech and Microgaming were the first one to launch this type of products. The NetEnt came on the market, obviously, and I believe a lot of other game studios were doing it. So what happened then? You need to manage that pool between several operators, and that's why first you need a seed, and that seed is prepaid by all the operators. So I remember when we were running Slot Million, Microgaming would ask us when we were entering the Mega Moolah jackpot to pay, I don't know, depending on how many bets we had the month before or what time we were entering, or where was because we were entering, let's say the jackpot started with a 500K seed, the jackpot was at 3 million, we had to pay for all the contributions that were made to reach the 3 million. Okay, so we were, and we had our pro rata to pay for that. And then, as we were a small casino and there were all the bet sons that were contributing, of course, more than us, they had more opportunity, their players, to win the jackpot than us. But we could put on the front page that we had
It was a marketing strategy more than anything else.
The crazy thing is that at the moment we entered the jackpot, we launched a website called Lady Lux, and we bought it from IGT back in time. So we bought this website, Lady Lux, from IGT. 1 month after launching the website, a player win a jackpot of what, £2 million?
I think it was £2 million.
£2 million on Mega Moolah on our website. We're like, wow, fuck, this is cool.
Yeah, the other side of that was Betson not too happy about all the contributions they had paid towards the jackpots that you had the pleasure of awarding to your customer.
Sorry, say again?
I'm saying at the other side of that was the operators that paid into that jackpot through larger scale contributions that see the pay go to your customer base.
Exactly.
So I get the appeal of the autonomy that an operator has by having their own jackpots made available through a product like Alea Jackpot. But how do you create the product appeal attractive enough, big enough prizes to compete with what was network jackpots across multiple operators? Is it a different value proposition to the player, more frequent hit rate, smaller community of competitors for that jackpot, so you feel the likelihood of winning is higher? Is it positioned differently? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, it's, as you said, it's a different value proposition, it's a different product, and if you want to build a jackpot, it's going to fall at 10 million with our product. You can do it, but I think the real value lies somewhere else. So I'm sure you can talk better than me about that.
Yes, no, definitely. It's you will have different typologies of players, and for sure, it's like people playing the lottery and they know that they have a chance in millions to win, but they still will spend because they think, what if? So you still have this typology of players that will play for the jackpot that is very big, and probably this is not in the budget that the casino can afford unless you're a very, very big operation. If you're a big operation, like Alex said, you can do it with the Alea Jackpot, but you need to have the budget for this. I would say that the typology of player you would address would be more, you can still have very consequent jackpots, because I think even an operator that's, let's say, modest operator, can probably hold a 50K jackpots. And I think this is still very appealing for players, especially if you do the marketing and then players can see that it's falling every 3 weeks or so. I mean, this is actually close to the player, and he feels like, okay, it could fall. It's right there. And if you play it right, and you have 1 or 2K jackpots falling every day, and then you can have mini jackpots if you fancy mini jackpots. Some players are very and also it depends what you do with streamers. You can really also hype up your jackpot if you have a very good frequency. I guess every operator will have then to find the right recipes, how they want to market their jackpot, how they want to, first, the storytelling around it, because you will do a theme, you will design. Is there an event around the World Cup or whatever it is? So there's a bit of storytelling and how you promote it on social media with streamers and so on. If you are hosting a jackpot that is falling very, very quick during peak time, and you can have even the 500 or 1K jackpot, 500 euro or 1K jackpot falling every hour, let's say, well, for the players, you can see the jackpot is there, falling, he keeps playing, falling again, and it's like, okay, at some point, that's going to be me.
And it doesn't, from the operator, you can still have large network jackpots. It's not one or the other. This is an addition. So it adds to the jackpot portfolio and kind of deepens the catalog of jackpot types available to players. So you had a decision in Alea in building this. You could build it stitched in natively as part of Alea Play, or you could have thought of it as a standalone product that sits outside of Alea Play. How did you take that decision to decide whether this should be something that sits and works exclusively with Alea portfolio content and your aggregated content versus a standalone product?
I want to say that I wanted to give it to the world, but it didn't happen.
We made that decision with blood and nails.
Okay, so let's talk about it.
Lots of conversations about this. On one end, Alex was more for the team that wanted to sell it to the whole world, and I can't. No, I mean there's value to that. I can completely hear it. And to be honest, we can still do it in the sense that the jackpot that we've built in-house, like or sitting on the aggregation, we could still create a component that will make it available to the rest of the world, even if they're not going through our aggregation. We don't have this at the moment, and this is not the optimum technological setup. It's adding latency. And this is why when you use a third-party jackpot tool, there's trouble. So not sitting directly on the gaming gateway, let's say, whichever game gateway you're using, you want your jackpot to sit on your game gateway. From a latency perspective, from a round consistency perspective, the jackpot is a product that attracts a lot of jackpot abusers, and they're going to try to swarm your jackpot at the very least, even hack your jackpot. And when you're using a third-party jackpot provider, there's plenty of notions, plenty of edge cases that they cannot handle because they are not sitting on the aggregation platform. So they cannot know what's the current state of the round. They cannot know if this has been canceled. They cannot know if the behavior of the player is a risky behavior. So as a consequence, they will just treat every contribution the same, and they will not be able to hold off the fourth. So that's one of the main reasons why I wanted absolutely to have it in-house. Now, we built the machinery in-house, and it's defending against those threats, let's say. Now what we can do is have an external component that's doing the bridge. So it would basically be kind of like sitting on the operator part and contacting Alea Play. So the jackpot would still be sitting on Alea Play, but technically you wouldn't be using Alea Play aggregation. We don't have this at the moment, but this is still possible.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, just to add something. So Charlotte insisted that it sits on aggregation really for security reconciliation issues that we see with third-party jackpot providers and where there's many examples, many case studies, but one of the most simple ones is you put a bet, you do a bet, it triggers a jackpot contribution, you remove the bet. Because in some games you can do that, and the contribution has been taken, but the bet has been taken back. So the contribution is in the system, but the player took his money back. And you may not see that. Your fraud team may not see that. So that's just one of the many examples of why it's tricky and there is risk in using an external tool. And that's the third-party external jackpot tool. And that comes back for everything we've been talking from the beginning, which are game APIs that should be as secure, that must be as secure as a banking API because there's money in and money out involved. And Jackpot is just another one of these tools. And if it comes on the side, on top, but not properly integrated, there's another risk of fraud.
That's what I enjoy. Of course, I'd say this. It's what I enjoy about formats like Connected, where we get to actually go a layer deeper and talk about things. Because to me, I think that's one of the most valuable points to be made about why you've built this as a native product. And it's difficult to put in the sales pitch. It's difficult to highlight a concern at that sort of lower level. Security, technology, vulnerability, even latency concerns are not usually the forefront of a sales pitch for a game, a player engagement tool. But it is a serious difference between what you can do with a fully native product connected to your game's aggregation layer that is not available to a standalone provider. And Charlotte, I understand from your experience and your sort of technical and product approach why you would have had that blood and nails fight in favor of not compromising on these critical factors.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Alex, congratulations for knowing when to concede defeat. So let's talk about the economics for a minute, because we've talked about that this is unlike what we think of network jackpots in terms of economics to the operator and even value proposition to the player. And you said that one of your reasons for looking at getting into this space was you were also critical of the value proposition of other companies that are doing this as a standalone product. So what does it mean to an operator? Is there a setup fee? Is there a monthly fee? Is it a rev share on the contributions? Just how does it work?
In terms of integration, this is plug and play for clients that are already clients of Alea Play, because we integrated this within our API. So it's just a matter of contacting your account manager and just asking to have the feature enabled. In terms of pricing, I think it's on revenue share from the contribution, from the admin fee that the operator puts on the contribution. We put a revenue share. So basically, it's more or less the same logic as with games. Operator makes a profit, and we share. On some cases, for small operations, we may put a minimum fee, but it really depends. Couple of thousands of euros or 5,000 euros, I think, at the moment. So there's no setup fee, and it's basically like plug and play, like I said.
So what the spirit of what we wanted to do is that we didn't want the operator to have to seed the jackpot, and we didn't want the operator to have, even if some operator requested it, so we did build that for some of our customers, we didn't want the operator to put the money for the jackpot. Let's say a 2,000 jackpot, and the operator puts the 2,000, because nobody wants to do that. But some of our customers requested that. They said, no, it's marketing money, I want to pay it myself. We wanted it to come from the side bets of the players, because we know they willingly do so on Octoplay, for example. And we wanted to leave to the operator the choice of how much they're going to take, what's going to be the house hedge on that. And from there, Alea is taking its revenue. More, nothing.
And do you work with the operator to help them design a proposition to decide what jackpots to launch with? Maybe look at what types of player demographics they're trying to service and advise?
Yes, absolutely. Completely, yes.
And you guys have developed the
simulator?
The simulator?
Yeah, okay. So I wanted to ask you about that. I saw something about you have a campaign simulator. So tell us about that. How does that work, and what benefit does it provide?
So configuring the jackpot is actually fairly straightforward. It's not very complex. You may have, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 elements to configure, but like in many things, when you do marketing campaigns, you may not realize that you're putting something wrong. So we wanted to have like a safety net for operators before they launch, to have that report telling them basically this is what's going to happen that we agreed on. Like, we're all looking at the numbers that you've put. It looks like your jackpot is going to, on average, fall between 8,000 and 10,000. From the traffic that you currently have, it looks like it may take 7 days to reach more or less this amount. And that would lead you to a profitability of approximately, 2,000. Is this what you want? And then yes, no, yes, let's go and let's publish. So the last step of the configuration of a jackpot campaign is basically what we call a simulator, which is stating for all the levels of the jackpot you've put, because you can put mini, medium, mega, etc. You can have up to 5 levels. For each of those levels, it's going to tell you basically what it looks like, how long in average it's gonna last, how big it's gonna get, with the profits you're gonna get from that, just so before you press the button, you can see clearly what's gonna happen. And you can confirm that this is what you had,
Okay, so is there any debate then for an operator? I guess what I'm gathering is that this is an additional product. There's no need to debate whether this replaces jackpots from a game provider, but I think there's still a strong incentive to have both. The strong incentive to still have a good catalog of vendor-specific jackpots that may have higher payouts, but maybe longer odds. Is this a scenario where you actually recommend an operator stick with a provider jackpot?
Yeah, but mostly if they're big network jackpots.
Yeah, the pooled one. The couple of the life-changing jackpots. I mean, you want to have that on your own page, definitely.
But I wouldn't promote a 50K jackpot from
any minor provider. That's why I would use. It's not just to. It's not about using the Alea jackpot. It's that jackpot. Let's call it a white label jackpot. It's the jackpot of the casino. It's the in-house jackpot. It's you come on the casino and it's our jackpot. We have a daily jackpot. We have a weekly, monthly, whatever, and then we've got the whatever big provider life-changing jackpots.
Oh, very interesting. And how's the rollout going? When is this first in the market? Is it live today with any operators, or when do you have your first deployment?
15th of June, first go live.
Are we able to talk about who that is?
We're starting with Sweepstakes.
We started with Sweepstakes.
Yeah, actually, I think if I'm not mistaken, we demoed the product to 7 of our Sweepstakes casinos, and they all asked for it. And all of them are lined up in the integration, in the starting block. They all want it first, which is difficult because they all...
And some of them are big.
Of course. Yeah, it's a big market. Okay, interesting. And then what about, is this the beginning of a rollout of other player engagement tools from Alea? Is there other products that you have in the roadmap? What can you give us a little bit of a preview of what the road ahead looks like?
So from Jackpot to Lottery, there's only one step really, because it's a very similar engine. So we had this discussion when building the Jackpot. We wanted to have a Jackpot that works like with tickets, and that when the jackpot is falling, multiple players can win, etc. But then Alex was pushing for this mostly. But for me, this is a different product. This is a lottery product. Granted that we can do with the same engine, but I want to separate it. I want to call it different. I want it to be clear for operators when they are gonna design the player journey. It has to be a lottery and not a jackpot that works like a lottery. So that's probably one of the first things we're going to do to extend from where we are. But after that, races, definitely, which also is not very far from lotteries and jackpots. And then at some point we'll tackle tournaments. But tournaments probably for 2027, because it's not the same engine. It's a bit of a different thought.
You want to say how we differentiate races from tournaments?
Races and tournaments?
Yes. Because for most of the people, the same thing.
Okay. But they're not.
No, they're not. And that's why I wanted you to say why not.
No, okay, yeah, I see why you could say a tournament could be a race, in the sense that you put a leaderboard and have players competing for the first position, and you call this a tournament. But that's a race. If we're looking, yeah, that's what is also called a race. I think the tournaments that we have in mind is more similar to what you had in video slots, for example, and the product that we had in Slots Million back in time, which is more players versus players. So it's like you're having a team of players playing against another team of players, and this is a real meta game. It's like you're playing with coins that are not, but you're playing with your own money, but it's basically your score competing with other people's score. You can have meta features on this. So you can imagine having a team of 5 players playing against a team of 5 players, and they have let's say skills, boosters, spells, depending what kind of universe the casino's in, like what kind of brands you have. But basically the idea is that you're either attacking, let's say, the other team with negative buffs, or you're boosting your own team with positive buffs, on top of the fact that you're currently all playing slot machines. And you're basically, it's a meta game really on top of the slots game.
And you have syndicate play, because you play together. So the win is syndicated, we share between each other. And you have a competitive play, because this team of 5 play against another team of 5. So, and they share their winnings, and they share their winnings. And as Charlotte said, they can throw spells on each other. So let's say I throw a spell on one of the team members of the other team, and that spell would be, on the next spin he's gonna do, if it's a win, it's zeroed. The next level of that spell would be, on the next spin he does, if it's a win, it comes to me. That's harsher, you know. I can send a booster to Charlotte that if on the next spin, if she has a win, it's multiplied by 2, or on the next 5 spin, it's multiplied by 5, for example. Or we would have spells where basically you can choose also next spin if a win multiplied by 10, of next 5 wins, if next 5 spins, if wins multiplied by 2 each, which is the same value if you think about it. 5 spin, 2 times per spin, next 1 spin, 10 times per spin. So you play with this kind of mechanics, and then on top of that, you can have people that are betting on the teams.
Well, that's would adding a layer a bit behind, which is an even further product.
Exactly.
It's amazing. I mean, you guys have been so successful with games aggregation. You've got a big catalog of content that you could provide an operator, and technically, you've had a strong focus on the important behind-the-scenes stuff, the API governance and the quality of the technology that you have. We've had a long-standing relationship with Alea. We have many customers that use you guys for games aggregation, and it's an easy sell for us if a customer is asking us for recommendations because it's pre-integrated, and it's always good to work with a company with good technical nous. This seems like a real natural extension where you're deploying the strengths of what you do already in your core product and leveraging that with natural extensions into gamification, beginning with Jackpots. And I think I'm getting a real sense of the creativity that is coming from your market visibility, market intelligence. Like you say, Alex, all the data you have and all the conversations you have with operators really informs your product direction. And Charlotte, you've got a very, I think, well prioritized approach to how you hold firm on certain product design approaches to ensure that you don't compromise the integrity of the core proposition in adding something new. And I think you put all that together, it makes Alea a pretty strong powerhouse. How important is this strategy for you to differentiate Alea from the rest of the companies in the games aggregation space? Seems like you're pulling out ahead.
Thank you for saying that, Ash. Talking about conversation we have from the people from the industry, you and I have a little pending conversation. Like, very chamber in Barcelona. Still waiting. Okay. I think it's Charlotte. I'll let Charlotte speak about that, but
I guess what I'm asking you, Alex, is do you see an opportunity here? As an investor, you've got a successful business with Alea. Are you now doubling down and building out a bigger moat between you and games aggregation competitors?
Yes, and we're probably going to look to acquire some of them. But to be completely honest with you, there's a lot of companies that are coming to us, and it's a very nice feeling that wants to buy Alea for very good multiplier. We could take that as a lottery ticket and just go and do something else. And we talked about it, to be honest. But we want to build stuff, and the meta game. We thought about doing a studio also and building games, but I think that where both agree, Charlotte and myself, is that there's a lot of things to do on the meta game, and there's so many things we can play with that have not been done yet, and Charlotte is very good at building things.
Thank you.
No, really.
I hadn't had the pleasure of speaking with you both at the same time before, but I really understand that often with successful businesses, there's a partnership that's very complementary, and I get a sense for how you complement each other, and it now makes sense about why Alea is as successful as you are. Congratulations on Alea Jackpot. I think it's going to be a fantastic product. We look forward to rolling it out with Pragmatic Solutions customers. If you're interested in Alea Jackpot and you're using our PAM platform, talk to us about it. It's already integrated. As Charlotte said, it's a configuration to activate jackpots through Alea. Talk to Alea about it directly if you'd like. They're easy to get a hold of. And I look forward to seeing the future of the other gamification products, the vision be unpacked. Thank you both for talking with me today and for coming on Connect. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Likewise. Thank you, Ash. Thank you very much.
All right. And thank you for watching.